What would you do if your family showed up one night, demanding your house, your sanctuary, without even asking? That's the bombshell that hit me at 55, when my perfect sister and her kids tried to claim the life I'd built, brick by brick, while I was left clutching a cold cup of tea on a porch I'd painted myself. Secrets unravel, mountains call, and I made a choice that shocked them all. Want to know how it ends? Hit subscribe and help us reach our first 1,000 supporters. I can't wait to share this journey with you. My name is Ellen Harper, and at 55, I've spent most of my life being the quiet one, the steady one, the one who doesn't make waves. I live in a small house on the edge of suburban Chicago, a cozy little place with a front porch I painted yellow myself and a backyard where I've nursed roses through more winters than I care to count. It's not much, but it's mine. Bought with 20 years of savings from my job managing the local library. I love that job. The smell of old books, the soft hum of people flipping pages, the way I can lose myself in organizing shelves while the world spins on without me. For a long time, that was enough. Until it wasn't. Growing up, I was never the star of the show. That role belonged to my older sister, Charlotte. Charlie to everyone who adored her, which was pretty much everyone. 5 years older than me, she was the golden girl with the dazzling smile and the kind of confidence that made people stop and stare. She aced school, charmed teachers, married a handsome lawyer named Greg, and popped out 2 perfect kids, Sophie and Liam, like it was all part of some grand plan. Meanwhile, I was just Ellen. Plain Ellen with her nose in a book, the one who got good grades but never the spotlight. Charlie was the sun, and I was the shadow trailing behind her, always a little dimmer, a little less noticed. I can still picture it like it was yesterday. When we were kids, Charlie got a shiny new piano for Christmas, all glossy black and begging to be played. Me? I got her old one. A beat-up thing with sticky keys that screeched when I pressed too hard. I didn't mind too much. I taught myself to play anyway, fumbling through chords while she took lessons and performed for the neighbors. On her high school graduation, Mom and Dad threw a backyard party with streamers and a cake that said, "Congrats, Charlie," in big red letters. When I graduated, they took me out for pizza at the corner joint and forgot to bring the camera. "You don't like fuss anyway, right, Ellen?" Mom said, patting my hand. I nodded, because what else was I supposed to do? That's how it always went. Charlie got the big moments, the loud applause, the endless praise. I got the leftovers. Her hand-me-down dresses, her half-used art supplies, her cast-off dreams. Don't get me wrong, I loved her in that complicated way you love someone who's better at being loved than you'll ever be. But it wore me down, year after year, until I stopped expecting anything else. I built my life around being the reliable one, the one who didn't ask for much. The house, the library, my quiet routines, they were my safe harbor, my proof that I could make something of myself without needing anyone to cheer me on. Then came the family dinner that turned everything upside down. It was a chilly Tuesday night in October, the kind where the wind rattles the windows and you wish you'd worn an extra sweater. Mom called me over to their place, a squat brick house in Elmwood Park they'd lived in since before I was born. I figured it'd be the usual, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and Dad grumbling about the Bears losing again. But when I walked in, the air felt different, thicker, like something was waiting to drop. Charlie was there too, perched at the table with her perfectly highlighted hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sophie and Liam were sprawled on the couch, noses buried in their phones, oblivious to whatever was brewing. We ate in near silence, forks scraping plates, until Mom cleared her throat and set her napkin down. "Ellen, honey, we need to talk about something," she said, her voice too gentle, the way it gets when she's about to ask for a favor I won't like. Dad nodded, chewing his last bite of meatloaf like it was his job. "It's about Charlotte," Mom went on. "She and Greg have hit a rough patch. That tech startup they invested in, it fell through. They had to sell their house and, well, they're in a bind." I glanced at Charlie. She was staring at her plate, twisting a ring around her finger. The diamond Greg gave her when he proposed, back when they were the couple everyone envied. "We're figuring it out," she said softly, but there was a crack in her voice I'd never heard before. I should have felt sorry for her. Maybe I did for a second. But then Mom kept talking. "We were thinking," she said, "since you've got that nice house all to yourself, maybe Charlie and the kids could stay with you for a while, just until they get back on their feet. It'd mean so much to them, Ellen. You've always been so good at helping out." The words landed like a punch. My house. My little yellow porched sanctuary. The one thing I'd carved out for myself after years of stepping aside. They wanted me to hand it over. Not just to share it, but to let Charlie and her kids fill it up with their noise and their mess and their needs. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd say something sensible, but he just shrugged. "You've got the space, kiddo. Makes sense." Charlie finally looked up, her blue eyes wide and pleading. "It wouldn't be forever, Ellen. I promise. We just need a soft place to land." Sophie giggled at something on her phone, and Liam kicked the couch leg, and I could already hear my quiet life slipping away. I didn't say much after that. I mumbled something about needing to think it over, kissed Mom on the cheek, and drove home with my hands tight on the wheel. When I got back, I stood in my living room, staring at the bookshelves I'd built myself, the roses I could see through the window, the life I'd made. And I wondered, how many times was I going to let them take it from me? How many times was I going to be the one who gave up everything so Charlie could shine? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my porch with a cup of tea gone cold, listening to the wind, and I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not the loud, yelling kind, but the slow, burning kind that creeps up your spine and whispers that enough is enough. For the first time in a long time, I didn't want to be the quiet one anymore. A week after that dinner, I was still turning it over in my head, like a book I couldn't put down but didn't want to finish. The idea of Charlie and her kids moving into my house felt less like a request and more like a theft. Slow and sneaky, the way fog creeps over a lake until you can't see the shore anymore. I kept picturing Sophie's sticky fingers on my bookshelves, Liam's sneakers tracking mud across my hardwood floors, Charlie's voice filling every corner with her endless chatter about Greg and their next big plan. My house wasn't big. It was just right for me, and that's what made it mine. But to them, it was a lifeboat, and I was supposed to be the one rowing. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. I just kept stalling, telling Mom I'd let her know soon, dodging Charlie's texts with excuses about work. But the truth was, I didn't know what to do. I'd spent so long being the one who helped out, the one who fixed things, that saying no felt like a foreign language I'd never learned. Every time I tried to imagine it, "Sorry, Charlie, I can't," my throat tightened up, and I'd hear Mom's voice in my head. "Family sticks together, Ellen. You've always been so good at that." Then one morning, it all came crashing into focus. I'd stopped by Mom and Dad's to drop off a casserole, something I did when I needed an excuse to check in without making it a thing. I was halfway to my car when I heard their voices drifting through the kitchen window, sharp and low like they didn't want anyone to catch them. "Charlie's counting on it," Mom was saying. "Ellen's got that whole house to herself, plenty of room for the kids. It's not like she's using it for anything else." Dad grunted. "Yeah, and it'd be good for Charlie to settle in there permanent like. She needs the stability." Permanent. The word hit me like a brick. I stood there, frozen in the driveway, the casserole dish still warm in my hands, while their voices kept going. "Ellen won't mind," Mom said. "She's never been one to fuss. Besides, Charlie's the one with the family to look after." I slipped back to my car before they saw me, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. They weren't asking me to help. They were planning to take my house, my life, and hand it over to Charlie like it was hers all along. Driving home, I couldn't shake it. The memories came flooding back, sharp and stinging, all the times I'd been pushed aside so Charlie could have more. When she had Sophie, I gave her half my savings for a new car because Greg's old one broke down, and Mom said it was the right thing to do. I didn't buy a car that year. kept taking the bus to work instead. The summer I'd saved up for a trip to the coast. Dad got sick, and I stayed home to nurse him while Charlie and Greg took the kids to Disney World. "You're so responsible, Ellen," Dad said, patting my hand. Responsible. That's what they called it when I gave up everything so Charlie could keep shining. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was shaking. Not with fear, but with something hotter, something that had been simmering under the surface for years. I walked inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and stood in the middle of my living room, looking at everything I'd built. The bookshelves I'd sanded and stained myself. The quilt on the couch I'd sewn one winter when the library was closed for renovations. The roses outside, stubborn and beautiful, just like me. This wasn't just a house. It was the one place where I didn't have to be Ellen the helper, Ellen the shadow. And they wanted to take it away. That's when I knew I couldn't let it happen. Not this time. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Lisa, my old college roommate who'd gone into real estate. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and familiar. "Ellen, what's up? You finally ready to sell that cute little place of yours?" She'd been teasing me about it for years, saying I could cash out and move somewhere new. I'd always laughed it off. Until now. "Actually, yeah," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Can you come by tomorrow? I need to do this fast and quiet." Lisa didn't miss a beat. "You got it. I'll bring the paperwork. What's the rush, though? Everything okay?" I hesitated, then said, "It will be." She didn't push, just promised to be there by noon. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of nerves and relief, like I'd just jumped off a ledge and hadn't hit the ground yet. The next day, Lisa showed up with her clipboard and a thermos of coffee. We sat at my kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window, and she walked me through it. Market value, timelines, how quick we could close. "You sure about this, Ellen?" she asked, peering at me over her glasses. "This house is your baby." I nodded, tracing the grain of the table with my finger. "I'm sure. I need a fresh start, somewhere they can't find me." She raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. By the time she left, we had a plan. List the house discreetly, sell it fast, and get me out before anyone could stop me. That night, Charlie came over unannounced. She knocked on my door with a plate of lemon bars in her hands, her smile as polished as ever. "I just wanted to say thanks, Ellen," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You're a lifesaver, you know that. The kids are so excited to have a yard again." Her eyes swept the room, my room, like she was already measuring it for new curtains. I forced a smile, my stomach twisting. "Sure, Charlie," I said. "We'll figure it out." She hugged me, her perfume sharp and floral, and I hugged her back, knowing it might be the last time. When she left, I locked the door and leaned against it, my mind racing. They thought they had me figured out. Good old Ellen, always ready to step aside. But not anymore. I was done being the shadow. I was selling this house, leaving this life and starting over somewhere new. And I wasn't going to tell a soul until it was too late for them to stop me. The next few days felt like I was living two lives at once. In one, I was still Ellen Harper, the dutiful sister and daughter, nodding along when Mom called to ask if I'd picked out a bed for Sophie yet, smiling through Charlie's texts about paint colors for the guest room. In the other, I was someone new, someone who stayed up late, packing boxes in the dark, whispering to Lisa over the phone about offers on the house, plotting an escape I could hardly believe I was pulling off. It was thrilling and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea how deep the drop was. But every time I wavered, I'd hear Mom's voice, permanent-like, and I'd keep going. Lisa worked fast. By the end of the week, we had a buyer, a young couple with a baby on the way, eager to settle into a quiet place like mine. They didn't haggle, didn't ask too many questions, just signed the papers and set a closing date 10 days out. "You're lucky," Lisa said, handing me a cup of coffee as we sat on my porch, the yellow paint glowing in the late afternoon sun. "Market's hot right now. You'll walk away with enough to start over anywhere you want." I sipped the coffee, letting the warmth settle in my hands. Anywhere they can't find me. I said, half to myself. Lisa grinned. You're a mystery lately, Ellen Harper. I like it. Where to go, though? That was the question I wrestled with every night, lying awake on my creaky old mattress, staring at the ceiling. I'd never been one for big moves. Chicago had been my whole world, from the library's dusty stacks to the roses in my backyard. But now I wanted something different, something mine. I pulled out a map I'd kept in a drawer since college, spreading it across the kitchen table like a treasure hunt. My finger landed on Asheville, North Carolina, a small city tucked in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'd read about it years ago in a travel book at the library. Quiet streets, artsy shops, mountains that turned gold in the fall. It sounded like a place where I could breathe again. So I called a realtor there, rented a little apartment sight unseen, and took a leap I hadn't known I had in me. Packing was the hardest part, not because I had so much, but because every box felt like a goodbye. I kept the essentials, my favorite books, dog-eared copies of Jane Austen and Toni Morrison, a stack of photos from when Grandma was still around, the rocking chair she'd left me that creaked just right when I sat in it. The rest I let go. The quilt stayed with the house, the extra dishes went to Goodwill, the roses I left for the new couple with a note that said, "Water them on Sundays." I didn't cry, though I thought I might. Instead, I felt lighter with every box I taped shut, like I was peeling off years of weight I hadn't known I was carrying. The day before the closing, Mom called again. "Ellen, honey, Charlie's picking out curtains tomorrow. When can they start moving in? She's so excited to get settled." Her voice was bright, like she was doing me a favor. I stood in my nearly empty kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, and lied through my teeth. "Soon, Mom. I'm just figuring out a few things. I'll let you know." She hummed, satisfied, and hung up. I set the phone down and laughed, a sharp, shaky sound that echoed off the bare walls. They had no idea. The closing went smooth as butter. I signed the papers at Lisa's office, watched the keys pass to the new couple, and pocketed a check that felt heavier than it should have. Lisa hugged me tight. "You're brave, you know that," she said. "Most people wouldn't have the guts." I shrugged, but her words stuck with me as I drove to the Greyhound station. Brave. I'd never thought of myself that way. Quiet, sure, reliable, always. But brave? Maybe she was right. I'd hired a small moving truck to take my things to Asheville ahead of me, so all I had was a duffel bag slung over my shoulder when I climbed onto the bus. The seats smelled like stale coffee and vinyl, but I didn't care. I found a spot by the window, tucked my bag under my feet, and watched Chicago slip away as we rolled out of the station. The skyline faded into gray, then green, then nothing but highway stretching out ahead. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running on someone else's clock. No Mom asking for favors, no Charlie needing a rescue, no Dad grunting about how I ought to pitch in. Just me, the hum of the engine, and a future I couldn't quite picture yet. Halfway through Indiana, I pulled out a notebook and started writing a letter. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Charlie," it began. "By the time you get this, I'll be gone. I sold the house. I'm starting over somewhere new, not because I don't love you, but because I need to love me too. Don't worry about me. I'm okay. Better than okay. Ellen." I didn't know when I'd send it. Maybe when I got to Asheville, maybe later. But writing it felt like letting go of a breath I'd been holding too long. I tucked the notebook back in my bag and leaned my head against the window, the glass cool on my cheek. As the miles ticked by, I thought about Charlie storming into my empty house, Mom's voice rising in disbelief, Dad scratching his head like he always did when he didn't get it. I didn't feel guilty, not really. They'd figure it out. Charlie always landed on her feet, and Mom and Dad had their own place. They didn't need me to save them. They just thought they did. And for once, I wasn't going to be the one who bent over backwards to make it work. The sun was dipping low when the bus crossed into Kentucky, painting the sky pink and gold. I smiled, a real smile, not the tight one I'd worn for years, and whispered to myself, "Asheville, here I come." I didn't know what was waiting for me there, but for the first time in a long time, I couldn't wait to find out. The first week in Asheville was like waking up from a dream I didn't know I'd been stuck in. I'd been on the bus for 16 hours, my legs stiff and my back aching, but when I stepped off at the station with my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, the mountain air hit me, crisp and clean like a promise. My new apartment was waiting, a tiny one-bedroom above a bookstore on a quiet street downtown. The moving truck had beaten me there, and my boxes were stacked neatly by the door, Grandma's rocking chair perched on top like a sentinel. I stood there for a long minute, just breathing, letting it sink in. This was mine. Not Mom's, not Charlie's. Mine. Back in Chicago, though, the storm was brewing. I'd turned my phone off on the bus, too afraid of the calls I knew would come once they figured it out. When I finally powered it back on, 3 days after I'd settled in, the screen lit up with missed calls. 17 from Mom, 9 from Charlie, even 1 from Dad, which was rare enough to make me pause. The voicemails started polite, then turned sharp. Mom's voice, high and trembling. "Ellen, honey, where are you? Charlie went by the house and it's empty. What's going on?" Then Charlie, clipped and furious. "I can't believe you do this to me, Ellen, to the kids. Call me back right now." Dad just grunted. "This ain't like you, kiddo. Pick up." I listened to them all, one by one, then deleted them without a word. I wasn't ready to explain, not yet. Life in Asheville started small, but it grew on me fast. The apartment had hardwood floors that creaked under my feet, and a window that looked out on the Blue Ridge Mountains, their peaks soft and hazy in the mornings. I unpacked slowly, finding spots for my books on a shelf the last tenant had left behind, setting Grandma's chair by the window where I could rock and read. The job at the local library came through a week later, a part-time gig cataloging donations, nothing fancy, but it got me out and talking to people. The head librarian, a woman named Ruth with silver hair and a laugh like a bell, took me under her wing. "You've got a knack for this," she said one afternoon, watching me sort a pile of dusty hardbacks. "You ever think about staying for good?" I smiled, not sure what to say. Staying for good sounded like a dream I wasn't ready to dream yet. Meanwhile, I kept picturing Charlie back in Chicago, storming into my old house with her measuring tape and her plans, only to find a stranger's key in the lock. I could see Mom wringing her hands, Dad pacing the kitchen, all of them scrambling to figure out where I'd gone. It wasn't hard to guess what happened next. Charlie would have called me selfish, Mom would have cried about family sticking together, and they'd all agree I'd lost my mind. But here's the thing. I didn't feel lost. For the first time in years, I'd been in Asheville 2 weeks when Charlie tracked me down. Not my address, thank God, but my phone. She'd gotten a mutual friend, Jenny, from my old book club to guilt-trip me into picking up. "Ellen, it's me," she said when I finally answered, her voice tight like a wire about to snap. "Where are you? What the hell happened? We showed up with the kids' stuff and some couple was moving in. They said you sold the house." I took a deep breath, rocking in Grandma's chair, the mountains stretching out beyond my window. "I did," I said simply. "I needed a change." "A change?" she snapped. "You left us high and dry for a change. Sophie and Liam are sleeping on air mattresses at Greg's mom's place because of you. We're broke. Ellen, I thought you'd help us." There it was, the old Charlie, the one who always expected me to swoop in and save the day. I waited, letting her words hang there, then said, "I've helped enough, Charlie. You'll figure it out. You always do." She sputtered, incredulous. "You're serious? After everything we've been through, you're just abandoning us?" I closed my eyes. "I'm not abandoning you. I'm choosing me. There's a difference." Then I hung up, my hands trembling, but my heart steady. That call stayed with me, rattling around in my head as I walked the streets of Asheville, past coffee shops and galleries, the air thick with the smell of pine. I thought about Charlie's perfect life, how it wasn't so perfect after all. The shiny marriage, the big house, the kids with their straight-A report cards. It had all fallen apart. and she'd run straight to me to pick up the pieces. But I wasn't that Ellen anymore, the one who'd hand over her savings or her dreams to keep Charlie afloat. I'd spent too long believing her light was brighter than mine, when really, she'd just been better at pretending. The neighbors started to fill in the gaps of my new life. There was Mr. Davis next door, a retired carpenter who brought me homemade jam and told stories about his wife who'd passed last spring. The woman downstairs, Clara, ran the bookstore and invited me to her knitting circle, where I fumbled with needles and laughed harder than I had in years. They didn't know my past, didn't care that I'd been the shadow sister. They just saw Ellen, the quiet woman with the books and the rocking chair. And slowly I started to see her, too. One evening, after a long shift at the library, I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my legs heavy but my mind clear. I stepped onto the little balcony that jutted out from my bedroom, a rickety thing barely big enough for a chair, and looked out at the mountains. The sun was sinking, turning the peaks gold and purple, and a breeze rustled the trees below. I leaned against the railing, breathing it in, the stillness, the space, the freedom. Charlie could have her drama, Mom could have her guilt trips, Dad could have his shrugs. I didn't need to carry them anymore. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. The mountain air slipping through my cracked window, the sound of crickets lulling me under. I didn't dream of Chicago or the house I'd left behind. I dreamed of a road stretching out ahead, winding through hills I hadn't explored yet, and me walking it, one steady step at a time. 3 months into my Asheville life, I barely recognized the woman I'd been back in Chicago, the Ellen who'd lived in that little yellow-porched house, the one who'd nodded and smiled and handed over pieces of herself like they didn't matter. She was fading, like a photograph left too long in the sun. In her place was someone new, someone who woke up to mountain air instead of guilt, who walked to work with a bounce in her step instead of a weight on her shoulder. I traded my old life for this one, and every day it felt more like home. The library job turned permanent, thanks to Ruth, who'd decided I was too good to let go. "You've got away with books and people," she told me one afternoon, her silver hair catching the light as we shelved a new shipment of mysteries. "You belong here." I grinned, sliding a paperback into place. Belonging. I hadn't known how much I'd craved it until I felt it, warm and solid, in this little mountain town. I started a book club too, meeting Wednesday nights in the library's back room, where a handful of locals sipped tea and argued about endings. Clara from the bookstore downstairs joined, her sharp wit keeping us laughing, and Mr. Davis brought his jam to share, calling it fuel for the brain. It was small, messy, imperfect, and mine. Back in Chicago, things had quieted down, or so I heard through the grapevine. Jenny, my old book club friend, sent me a letter. Not an email, an actual letter, her looping handwriting filling the page. She wrote that Charlie and Greg had rented a cramped apartment on the north side, a far cry from their old sprawling house. Sophie was sulking about sharing a room with Liam, and Greg was scrambling for freelance work after the startup flop. Mom and Dad were disappointed, Jenny said, but they'd stopped asking her to track me down. "Charlie's mad as hell," she added, "but she'll get over it. She always does." I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, not sure if I felt relieved or sad. Maybe both. I didn't call them. Didn't write back either, not yet. The letter I'd scribbled on the bus still sat in my notebook, unsent, its edges curling from being handled too much. I'd meant to mail it, to give them some kind of closure, but every time I picked it up, I'd stop. What could I say that they'd understand? That I'd spent 55 years being the one who gave, and now I needed to take? That I wasn't running from them, but toward myself. They'd see it as betrayal no matter how I worded it, so I let it sit, a quiet promise I'd keep when I was ready. Instead, I started writing something else. A journal at first, just scraps of thoughts about leaving Chicago, landing in Asheville, finding my footing. But the scraps grew into pages, then chapters, and one night, sitting in Grandma's rocking chair with a mug of tea, I realized it could be a book. A story about a woman who'd spent her life in the shadows and decided, at 55, to step into the light. Not a bestseller, maybe not even something I'd publish, but a record of this, of me. I wrote about the yellow porch I'd left behind, the roses I'd tended, the family I'd loved and let go, and I wrote about Asheville, the mountains that held me up, the people who didn't ask me to be anything but Ellen. The truth settled in slow and deep. I hadn't lost my family by leaving. I'd lost the version of me that thought I had to carry them to be worth something. Charlie didn't need me to save her. She never had. She'd built her life on quicksand, chasing shiny things that crumbled, while I'd built mine on stone, steady and small but real. Mom and Dad would always love her best, and that was okay. I didn't need their spotlight anymore. I had my own. One Friday evening, after the book club wrapped up, I invited everyone back to my place. It wasn't planned, just a spur-of-the-moment thing, the kind of idea I'd never have acted on back in Chicago. Clara brought a bottle of wine, Mr. Davis carried a jar of his plum jam, Ruth showed up with a loaf of bread she'd baked that morning. We crowded into my tiny apartment, spilling onto the balcony with its shaky railing, the mountains dark and looming beyond us. The air was cool, the stars sharp overhead, and we ate and drank and talked until the night turned soft around the edges. I looked at them, these people who'd become my people, not because I'd bent over backwards for them, but because I'd shown up as me. Clara, with her knitting needles clicking. Mr. Davis teasing Ruth about her lopsided bread, Ruth laughing so hard she nearly tipped her chair, and me, Ellen Harper, 55 years old, sitting in the middle of it all, not hiding, not shrinking, just there. I raised my glass, the wine catching the light. 2 new beginnings, I said, my voice steady. No matter how old you are. They clinked their glasses against mine, their voices overlapping. 2 new beginnings. And I felt it deep in my bones. This was what I'd been chasing all along. Later, after they'd gone, I stood alone on the balcony, the quiet settling over me like a blanket. The mountains stretched out, endless and patient, and I thought about the road ahead. Not the one I'd left behind, but the one I was on now. I didn't know where it'd take me. Didn't need to. I'd spent so long waiting for permission to live my life, and here I was, doing it anyway. So here's what I'd say to anyone listening. Anyone who's ever felt stuck in someone else's shadow, it's never too late to step out. To sell the house, take the bus, start over. To choose yourself, not because you don't love them, but because you do, and you deserve to love you too. I did it at 55, with a duffel bag and a rocking chair, and I've never felt more alive. Maybe you've got a story like that in you too. Maybe it's time to find out.